Okay, so thanks for joining the discussion tonight. It's basically a fireside talk. It's nice and warm. So it's shiny, but also, yeah, warm. So I would like to start with a provocative question. Why does health data need to be secure if there is a good public health care that's free?
Question back. There is a good public health care. I would question that one to be. Oh my God, we need something like. So if you use the term good public health care, what do you refer to?
Basically, you can't be discriminated because of a disorder.
Yeah, but this is not what secure data is good for. If we saw like what the guys were presenting today, it was more about where do you store your data, and I think it was very good to know like it is already a decentralized system in a way, especially in Germany. You don't have the data at one place because otherwise it would work so much more smoothly. When I go to the doctor, I have to wait like an hour, and they don't have my data there, so I have to bring some like printed papers often. Yeah, that might be secure, but you can also say it's not.
That's the availability. Let's, for a few moments, discuss the security. I mean, this was the topic of Hartmut's talk. There are other areas where we are surprised that hacks don't make the world as we know it collapse. There is, for example, this story that Janif Ehrlich always tells, a hack of a dating platform in Israel, I think. You probably know that story. And a high percentage of couples could just visit that website with the hack and find out that their partner was cheating. Israel is still fine. So
actually, if you mentioned Israel, so here there is also a cultural difference that are interesting, because in Germany, maybe more than anywhere, people really care of their privacy. For example, in the United States, a little bit less. In Israel, people don't really care about their privacy. For example, back to healthcare, that's one of the reasons why the whole thing with Pfizer vaccination went so well in Israel, because Israeli government decided to give all healthcare data to Pfizer, and everybody was fine with that. People didn't really care. If the same thing would happen in Germany, it would probably cause a riot or something. So cultural differences are important, and it's true that Israelis specifically don't really care about their privacy too much. But even with Israel, for example, if there is a VIP person that goes to a hospital, and then this data transmitted to some central place and leaked, and then adversaries can leverage this data against this VIP person, that can be a problem.
Just don't think, let me come back to my thought. If you want to make it more accessible, this is where we need an extra security, because at the moment, how our system works is exactly like this. It might be super secure, but why is it secure? Because it's not accessible where you need it. And this is exactly where we need to create a new bridge, because when I go to the doctor, as I said, like there's a queue that goes down to the street, and how can this be simplified so that it's a better customer experience? And then I need an extra layer of security for my data. So for me, this is kind of, where does it start? You need a better security to achieve this goal.
But I guess we have to distinguish between privacy and security, because there's technical security, which we can... It's working? Okay. So basically we have to distinguish between technical security and privacy. And private data needs to be private. I'm absolutely for that. And it's not only in Germany, it's also in the US. So you have the same things now in the US. From a culture perspective, it's definitely something which is treated differently. So I fully agree to that. So Israel is open, is potentially more adapted to change because of the situation, I guess. Also, you need to adapt to change more often and more easily. But there are other cultures, like in the Nordics, they treat extremely the private data, but nevertheless are open to find solutions. Instead of in Germany, I have at least the impression, well, people are hesitant. If they really would like to give it, they only have thoughts of, okay, this what is not working, instead of how can we solve it, because privacy per se is a positive thing.
Okay, thanks. Let's talk about incentives. So we heard in some of the talks that data sharing is behind expectations, and you're thinking about how to incentivize it. So why is the perspective of good health not enough motivation to share data? Do we simply have to educate everyone that this can be achieved by sharing?
You should say something.
I think a lot of people don't know the consequences or have not yet seen the positive effect of that. Yeah, so they all see the positive effect of sharing social data because they have many friends on Facebook and a lot of followers on Instagram and so on, and they immediately start sharing. And if you show them some good use cases and a lot of benefit of sharing health data, and that increases their own reputation on the social side, that's probably questionable, but also that it can contribute to quicker and faster diagnosis for themselves and for others, I think then people will soon start sharing it. It's just a matter of the benefit. And I think very often when we talk about use cases and so on, for us it's, oh, isn't this technically cool? Business people say, what's in it for me? And that's also true for all the humans.
Yeah, and if you're healthy, this is the thing. As long as you're healthy, you don't see a benefit in sharing your data. It might go for, we were talking about this yesterday, it might go if you have a disease, and it might even be stronger if your child has a disease, as you said. But otherwise, why should I even go to the doctor or share my data? Because then this privacy aspect, especially in Germany, comes into like, no. This is, oh my goodness, they can do everything with me. And when my genome is sequenced, oh my goodness, what will happen with my data? And they can steal me as a person. So then all these questions arise, and I would totally agree with Wolfgang. When you see what is in there for me, and this is why I talked about this gamification aspect also. Like when you get used to it from a very early age, and you just are like, okay, this is super simple, this is easy, we do it like this. This will be trained, and it will be absolutely normal for you. And the question, of course, then the ethic question is, do we really want this or not? Because then comes the cultural aspect again. But if you want to do this, to make it accessible for DeSci applications, of course, why not? But then start early.
Can you quickly explain DeSci?
Decentralized science, like DeFi, decentralized finance. We have also the term for science. Meanwhile, because when we store the data in decentralized spaces, it's DeSci, and more people can work together. So this is a term from the US.
Maybe one comment to that, also with cultures. So if you look into the Nordics again, they have an opt-out system, right? By default, it's opt-in, and then only you decide to opt out. And that is something which really helps. So for example, everybody, because from my perspective, you cannot leave it to every single person to have a 12-pager of defining a consensus for opting in for something like research. If there's a central consensus, just a societal consensus that this is useful, then it should be an opt-out system, because otherwise this will never fly.
On the other hand, we are constantly sharing our health data with this nice smartwatch. Yeah, I'm constantly sharing it. because it's cool. And they give me something back because they give me some analysis. It looks nice. I can share it with my family. It's cool. I just do it. And maybe what should be done more on a political basis is that when they say, okay, if they sell these devices here in Germany, they can take the data. But on the same hand, they should make the data of the German people or data that is gathered in Germany also available to research. It should become an anonymized, open data. And on the other hand, then I can tell you an example. We are currently working in a project for the Ministry of Agriculture, and there it's about providing fair prices to farmers. And we made the proposal, why don't you make all the data about the farming available, about the size, about how they produce, about the animals, why don't you make it open data? And then people can see if they buy a product by linking through, obviously, blockchain stuff to this data, then we have this. And well, they really got offensive. They say, well, we are not living in a Planwirtschaft. Yeah, we are not living in communism. We couldn't make this open data. Yeah, I wouldn't put my tax revenues on the web. Yeah, but we are not talking here about tax revenues. We are just talking about somehow public data about farmers. And sometimes there is just this movement that people are just against it for being against it because it's sharing of something. Yeah. So sometimes it's very strange how people react on that.
But once again, it's come to a point if you get something in return, like with the wearables. So that's a good reason why we all share healthcare data. And before this, same thing was with 23andMe, that everyone shared all their genomic data just to hear some nice information. So it's really easy, actually, to incentivize people. It's not hard. 20 years ago, no one would upload his own image to the internet, to something you just don't do. And today, everyone does it because you get something in return. And as you said, same thing happening on organizational level. We at BRIA, we started before COVID. So we started to talk to American hospitals before, and none of them wanted to participate in any data exchange. And then after COVID, it shifted, and now it's pretty much most of them are in.
Yeah, I mean, we had this case here in Germany that you had Biometric much earlier than we had it because you just agreed that the data is being shared back to the company. Yeah. And we had this discussion here in Germany about this case.
Anna, you were talking about, or you showed a Venn diagram, metaverse and Web3, which is not the same. So sometimes definitions change also over time, right? So next generation sequencing is kind of a moving target. It really depends in which year you are, what that actually is. And as far as I understood your talk, metaverse is much more about the experience and the accessibility of, well, virtual spaces. What is the doctor's visit that you would like to do in the metaverse?
So I, for myself, I can only speak for myself right now, but for me, for example, this always the biggest hurdle to even go to the doctor. I like these applications where you can, for example, check your skin already. So if I just have the experience, for me, it does not have to be actually a virtual world. We were talking about this at lunch. If I just have kind of a surface, a second layer where I can scan things or so, that would also really make it more accessible. And then I have the doctor talking to me about things. Why do I always have to visit? Most visits, they don't even touch you. They don't even really see you. So having this accessibility through a metaverse, I think that for younger generations, it would even be easier maybe to have some avatar there, not to be themselves, because sometimes it's a hurdle to really see a doctor. I see this with many children especially, and to make it just more of a fun experience to get into this learning.
But what's the difference to telehealth?
There is no, as I said, this is already being tested. I think it's progressing, and the question is, how do we integrate it maybe into more fun worlds? Coming back to the incentivization of doing your yearly checkup, for example. This is something that people often don't do. Why don't they do it? Because it's such a hurdle for them to even visit the doctor, and all the things that you can do virtually in this case. Also, for example, going to a psychologist, it is super hard. First, you don't get one. This is the first thing. It is often, especially if you live on the countryside, it is impossible you have to wait for 6 months, which especially for children and teenagers that now had to go through COVID, it was nearly impossible to even get an appointment. Would it be easier to have more virtual spaces where you can share your information, which most teenagers already do? They are kind of used to this. To not have the hurdle to drive 1 hour by train to even get there. So make it more accessible, however that's possible, would be a benefit for everyone, especially if you need the help and don't get it.
Yeah. I think very often we confuse the metaverse with comic figures in a 3D environment. Yeah? And that is not what we do when we visit a doctor. But imagine that you really have a large screen, that you have high-resolution cameras, and that you have the feeling that you really sit in front of the doctor with a high-bandwidth connection and all the rest. And this is also something of the metaverse. Metaverse is not always just 3D characters in a 3D world. It could also be just giving the presence of people in the same room. And I think this projection here, although it's extremely hot, it's cool because we had the feeling that the presenter was almost there. It's the size. You made him life-size. And that gives a lot of feeling about presence of other people in the same space, even if it's not 3D. Another example of a doctor visit in the metaverse is what we say when we also try to define our own definition of a metaverse. And we say the metaverse is being influenced by the real world, and the real world is influenced by the metaverse. So data is being exchanged, and we have digital twins over there. So a visit in the metaverse with a doctor could be that I go in person, but suddenly there is a buddy showing up, yeah, which is 3D and virtual, but it shows some health data, and the doctor is able to explain me what my problem is on this particular 3D model that is just hovering in the air. Yeah, because it's being fed by data that I have gathered, by the data he collected and other data. So we should think of the metaverse also as an extension of the reality with additional media. And in the very simple case, this is just a very big screen.
And to add on this, I don't know who knows the application Casablanca.ai, which is coming out soon. It gives you the feeling that you always have eye contact to the other person, which is something that is still lacking at the moment when you're on Microsoft Teams. This is why virtual meetings are sometimes like everybody's looking on some device or whatever. And this transfers, it somehow, I don't know how they do it, but if you don't look like on your phone like this, but just have a small angle, then it refers to the person sitting on the other side, and you will always feel that the person is holding eye contact. And this does so much with your hormones, especially in the direct connection, that it's really, really useful. So all these small things will add on to experiences that we do not know yet, but that are being developed. And also, I think if we talk about robotic and AI, what is coming there also with help that might not even be from a human being anymore. How will this also contribute to a better healthcare system, especially with elder people?
Okay, I would also like to involve the audience again. So there are some questions that were posted already in the virtual platform. One also for Wolfgang. Do you think that Web 2 and 3, Web 3 will replace Web 2, or will they coexist together?
It's just an evolution. I mean, the Web 2 didn't kill the Web 1, where we just could read. It just adds additional features and functionality to the existing web. Yeah? So I think that's the way it goes. It will not completely replace it. There will still be services where we use wallets, where we use user ID passwords, still be where we log in with a platform ID, still where we just read, still where we interact, and then there will be the further extension. I think this is often a misunderstanding that new technology substitutes the old one. It just adds a new feature to it. On the other hand, it makes it much more difficult. We see it with COVID at the beginning. We were happy, now we have all these communication channels. And after 3 weeks, we thought, oh my God, email, chat, Teams, Zoom, all the different channels. And then we had to somehow consolidate back to what is really essential for our communication. So it will extend it. Maybe some things drop off or will be used less, but it will. Sometimes I'm really astonished how much the human really can capture on new communication channels. Yeah.
Basic misconception that we have a revolution. People always see a revolution at a certain point of adoption, but until it comes to this feeling of, oh my God, there is a revolution, there have been years of development that lead to this point. And it's just that the masses only recognize it when it has already been done by so and so many people. And then you feel like, oh my goodness, this is so new, this is something that has never been there before. But look at blockchain. Bitcoin started in 2009. Ethereum has also been there for many, many years. As we already said, like in 2016, all these ideas had already been existed, but now people have started developing. Now the big brands are coming into the space, and more people realize that this is existing and it's a thing. And this is the same with Web3. I don't even know the term Web3. I wonder how many people really know it. When I go out of my bubble into the real world and I say, well, I am innovation lead Web3, people look at me like, and that is? So that still needs a lot of explanation because people don't really understand what it is. They don't even know, most of them don't even know the term Web2, by the way. People are like, okay, I use the internet. They don't talk about Web 1, Web 2, Web 3. I use the internet. It shall just do what it has to do. It shall deliver me news or my social media. So mostly people talk about the products that come out of it and not about the technical things that are in the background. And this is what we, when we talk to brands or companies, always have to realize. If you go from B2B, you can use these terms. If you go from B2C, you should avoid them as much as you can.
Okay, so I would like to rephrase a question from Nicolas from Wolfgang. So for Wolfgang, so Nicolas asked about copying NFTs or whatever they refer to, and changing bits and pieces of it. So this is a tricky question because if I think about health data that we share or rent, we need to make sure that
it's the origin.
It's the origin.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it's a question that we hear very often. I mean, I've shown the picture of Beeple and of all the Bored Apes. I mean, I could take the picture of Beeple, yeah, that was sold for $69 million, and I can make a new NFT of that within 5 minutes. The picture is available. You can get it from the internet, from the IPFS, and you get it. You can even print it and put it on a wall. I mean, there is no copy protection behind that. So I just take it. I create a new NFT, and then I try to sell it to Peter. And if he's stupid enough, he will buy it. I say, well, it's not 69 million. I sell it for 1 million. The hype is over. 1 million is okay, and he probably is stupid enough to buy it. Next week on the newspaper, we have NFTs is all fake, and the whole internet is rubbish, and blockchain is just scam. The point here is, the blockchain and all the NFTs, they don't guarantee any originality, and you have to prove it. And what is essential is the origin of the digital assets. Where does it come from? And therefore, Christie's, who sold this, they have also the smart contract address on the web. They have the wallet address of Beeple on the web. They have their address on the web, so that everybody can prove that this NFT that I'm selling is probably not the original one. And you see, suddenly, the blockchain and the Web3 is somehow anchoring in old traditional media. They probably could have Twittered it or put it in the New York Times. just in a different media where people can have a root who was the originator of this particular NFT that can be associated. And the same is then true for medical data. I think if you publish medical data, it's essential that you put your address somewhere carved in stone so that everybody can prove it. It was Peter who did this, and he is trustworthy. Yeah? So the web doesn't provide, the blockchain doesn't provide trustworthiness in the sense that the data is correct and that it's coming from the right person. And a lot of people try to cheat other people by just publishing bored apes. Yeah? But you always have to check, do they really come from Lava Labs or do they come from Wolfgang Prinz? For me, they are worthless. I mean, they are useless. From Lava Labs, €2,000 or whatever.
This is so interesting because, of course, at the gallery we had the same problem. So we had an extra certificate that was also on chain where the artist had to sign that it's really their artwork to make it not only accessible on chain, because this is the problem, for example, with Discord. Whoever's on Discord, there's just a different number. You can so easily fake names, and this is why so many people are tricked into, oh yeah, this sounds like and there's just one letter or one dot extra, and people don't realize it. And it's the same thing with the address. The addresses are so complicated, except that you have an ENS address where it says something like .eth. Then, well, okay, it's easy. So if you want your wallet to be accessible, well, choose a name like your name. I chose some 5-letter name that is really, really easy for everyone to find my wallet that I want to be seen. And then this provenance aspect is easy. But if you have a digit code of, how many digits are? A lot. I don't even know. See, I don't even know. Then it's so hard to even recognize whether it's the right address or not. So this is why ENS has become, in the bear market, it has become one of the most traded goods on blockchain, by the way.
Yeah, but there's a difference, I think, between collectibles, where provenance matters, and data, where the actual data matters. This is similar to what Hartmut already mentioned in his talk. So the worth is the analyzed data, and it can be a very similar value if I do it on slightly modified data.
Yeah, but then it's still, who did it? That's essential. I mean, who's the originator of the data? That's essential. Whether it's on the blockchain or not, if you just put it on a cloud service or if you publish it. I mean, I could publish your paper, yeah, somewhere. I just take your paper, I put my name on it, and publish on any obscure journals that are currently around. Yeah, it's still the same. You still have to prove the provenance, and the blockchain makes it a little bit easier to prove that, but it doesn't guarantee the truth of that. You still have to use your mind to check that this is the original.
And I think, by the way, with healthcare data, the challenge is less big than with art, because most of the generators of the data are hospitals. So most of the data is in the B2B space, where it's much easier to track the origin of the data. It's coming from the hospital. It's much easier than on the B2C network, where everyone can copy the art.
Well, basically what we have to respect is a certain trust framework. So have identities, who is providing what, that's provenance, that's lineage. And we cannot generate trust. That's what I said before, and we can earn it. But now I know, Peter, you write good papers. That's why I trust you when I read the next time. That's the same thing with media. That's the same thing with anything what I get from states. There are some states out there which we definitely don't trust. So this will not change. But what is good about blockchain is if the concept of blockchain is transparent, then we know it's immutable. So we should be trusting the information as a transaction which is on there if we trust a blockchain per se. And that's basically a technical implementation, like you said, of something of a trust framework, but nevertheless, it always needs to be combined with something like a trust framework for identities, and might it be our identities or then some service identities where this actually has been transacted.
Nicolas, you had a question in the Q&A. Would you like to ask the panel? Yes. Can you pass the cube?
Yeah, biometrics. Like, no one's talked about them today. I was just wondering, because we're talking about linking digital to real people. It seems like that's the link, the missing link to, I don't know what the panel's views are on biometrics. Should they be used more? We're already using them for our phones, I guess. Would people be okay with sharing their biometric data in the cloud or whatever? Or
well, I would say it's coming back to identities, because if we talk about us, biometrics would be a good way to identify ourselves. If we're talking about machines, machine-to-machine communication, basically it's about communication. We don't have anything like biometrics. We need to have some cryptography, like certificates for a certain machine, that something happened on that machine, which produced some data. And it's just another anchor, maybe, for us as people, where we can actually use it, but there are other spaces where we can't. And we have to fine-grained really decide on what type of data and certification on this identification is really useful to use it, actually.
Yeah, I think that addresses a very important point, which is actually when you use a blockchain in supply chain tracking. Yeah, it's easy. I mean, we can do it easily for pictures. Yeah, pictures have a hash value, and then we just compute the hash value again of the picture, and it's the same. Put it for coffee. Yeah, I mean, this coffee is coming from Africa or from South America or whatever. You can do it with Nestle. I mean, Nestle with Nespresso, yeah, they have blockchain coffee. You can, I think it's sold out, but we still have something in our blockchain lab because we cooperated with them. And so you can track the coffee on the blockchain, and you see this coffee is really coming from this particular coffee farmer. Yes, but there is no any biodata of the coffee itself. Who tells me that nobody just exchanged the coffee itself? Yeah, so there is the mapping of real goods onto a digital identity is really complicated. We can it with humans, yeah, with fingerprints or other kind of things, but with all the other goods, it's really different. I know that Siemens was trying to track potatoes, yeah, and they could even track the potato by some genomic data from the farm where it was grown up to the potato chip in the end. And they use that particular data really to track it on the blockchain. And as soon as you have that, you are fine. I think we were working with Bayer, and I know that they were also considering how can we track pharmaceutical, or how can we track medicine, yeah, with a way that cannot be cheated, so that we have a digital asset or digital identity.
One thing maybe about the biometrics, when you go into digital assets, this is very interesting when you go into these deep fake worlds where you can really leave a legacy or make someone live longer than he even lived. Then you need all these data from the person, and you will be scanned. It's a little bit complicated. This is why it's not accessible to everyone. But I also see, I was wondering, because it's being done with some celebrities right now. Do you want this? Is it good to have like this afterlife person that looks like you, like with all your biometrics? Because it's also like, I've heard the walk, how you walk, it is something that identifies you. So if I have my like digital identity in the metaverse and I want to be myself, there are a lot of metrics that need to be taken into account for this. And it will be interesting of how many people want a replica of themselves, or how many people don't even want to see themselves in the metaverse. This is also an interesting question of identity, gender, and all the questions that we already have in the real life. Because basically gender should not play a role anymore if you're in the metaverse. You could become, from one day to another, whoever you want to be. Maybe you want to be a cat, okay, then you're a cat. Today I want to be a man. Okay, no problem. I can just change my avatar, and I can live like and act like this. Nothing keeps me away from being who I want to be in the metaverse. And this is kind of a freeing thought, I would say, and that many don't see at the moment when we talk about so many problems with identity that we have in the real life, where it can't be changed that easily. So for me, yeah, do I want to be myself or not, or do I want to be someone else? We, for the first time, have the chance, I would say, to be whoever we want to be. If this happens, like this virtual reality that we are maybe dreaming or not dreaming of, because it might also be a totally dystopian thought. Metaverse, I think we were not talking about this today, is a dystopia from 1992 from the book called Snow Crash. And it was never a thought of having a beautiful metaverse. It is the way that people chose to live because the real world is so bad. So it is on us of what we make of this, if this is even the right term, because I have also read, just like with NFTs, don't say metaverse anymore. Say more like digital showroom if you're into fashion, or say digital WWF again did something. I mean, they did an NFT last year. Now they have this metaverse with Journée where you can save the oceans by buying an NFT. Yeah, we will see. Is this just marketing? Will it really help? It looks very fancy, but we have to see what comes out of it. So yeah, it's interesting. It's still, in this point, early, I would say.
So in the first session, we basically learned about the 200 or 200 or 300 euro genome, right? And for us, this means we can do different kind of research than with 2,000, 3,000 euro genomes. In the slide that Hartmut showed, the decision tree, when to use blockchain, part of the no's were cost related, right? Because there's an overhead of costs that blockchain technology generates. For which kinds of application do you think is cost so prohibitive that we currently don't use it? I mean, from TJ, we heard something about 2 cents per transaction. That doesn't sound much at first, but let's think about 2 cents per base, and we wouldn't do genome sequencing now, right? So what if costs are really going down for blockchain?
Yeah, well, I would distinct, because blockchain, if you have IPFS, a lot of the data lives with IPFS, and the pointer to it from the transaction is actually pointing to it. Same things is with off-chains, right? You have on-chain data where you actually transact. So you have the consensus where we know any kind of transaction currently on the blockchain is about 100 euro. One transaction. So if we would do that for a 2 cent transaction, it does not really make sense. That's why we use distributed databases or central databases in banks, because they can do it much more efficient. If we now have something like proof of stake, where we're showing that we were going down from an energy perspective by 99.5%, so pretty much to nothing, then the transaction cost goes down, but still, leave the data where it is. Blockchain is a measure, it's a ledger. I mean, that's the good picture you had. We have a ledger since, when did it start? Medieval, yeah. So quite some time ago. And this is how we should be treating it.
David, do you want to comment on that?
So actually, Helmut said most of what I wanted to say, but one thing that I can add here is another thing that Helmut mentioned before in the decision tree when you need a blockchain. So in many cases, if you need a blockchain, you can use a private blockchain, and then not necessarily it costs anything. It depends on the use case. Not always you need this public blockchain with proof of work when it's really expensive.
I mean, you're coming from the bottom. You say, well, what can we do with a 1 cent transaction? The other way around is we ask companies, what would you like normally to do with, or where could you get a business benefit by using a notary for parts of your business processes, but the notary is too expensive? And when they say, yeah, it's about this particular certificate. So, for example, we talked to a big logistics company that is located nearby, Talke. You may have seen it. They have very large lorries, and what they do is they transport chemicals, not beer, really dangerous chemicals. And the whole certification process on the cleaning of the tanks goes on paper. Yeah? And they have added benefit when they say, well, we provide additional quality and additional service by providing now traceable cleaning documents. Yeah, or we normally would like to use a notary, would like to have really secure data and the provenance of the data, but we can't do it, and then the blockchain can help. If it's then just a cent, then blockchain becomes applicable. Yeah. And about this whole thing about the IPFS and the off-chain and on-chain data, there's actually a dilemma. Yeah, I mean, you pointed me to this dilemma of scalability and so on. There's really a dilemma. What we want to have is smart contracts that act on the data on the blockchain. On the other hand, data on the blockchain is expensive. Yeah, therefore, we put it somewhere else. Yeah, and if we want to compute on it on the blockchain, then we need to bring it back from the external off-chain database into the blockchain for the smart contract to be able to operate on it. And that is currently still a dilemma, somehow, which has not yet fully been solved, yeah, to do that. Because normally we store the data off-chain, then we hash it somewhere, but with hashes, no smart contract can compute if something is in order or not.
So the way we solve it, at least in Bria, is that data is transmitted off-chain, but it's transmitted encrypted. And the smart contract validates the data, and only if the smart contract is validated, then the decryption key is transmitted on-chain.
Yeah. That's right, but just take something like the example that I gave about the production machine. Yeah, you give the order, produce it, and cook it by 100 degrees. Yeah, and then the smart contract would deliver 100 degrees or the temperature for each product to the blockchain, such that the smart contract can check, it's 99 or 101, so it's in the interval. But this would mean for each sensor value, you have a transaction on the blockchain, and it becomes larger, larger, and larger, and more cost-intensive. Yeah? So for these things, there is still a dilemma, and you can't do that on a public blockchain. It's just too expensive, and for that you use second-level blockchains.
But maybe we should be thinking of information objects. So really, what needs to come together? How do we do the indexing and then do the transaction? Really, from an architecture point of view, put it where where it actually should be living. And sometimes maybe data does not even need to be generated. It needs to be analyzed, but maybe directly at the sensor and then discarded, because after a couple of milliseconds, it has no value anymore. So that happens a lot, right? So for example, like any kind of sensor data from an autonomous car or something, it only is relevant at the specific point in time. Afterwards, you can just discard it, because it's just putting money on the table, which you actually need. So really, it's about an architectural thing, and blockchain for immutability, because that's the major benefit we have there, and then really think about where we deploy it and where we just leave it off.
So, Anna, I think in your talk there were many references many of us never heard about, right? So, including me.
That's cool.
I for sure enjoy it, and I will check out Roblox just to know why 20 million people,
200 million per month,
200 go there every day. Do you think there is some content in these applications that also the elder population would benefit from, or is it just
you
something?
Start elder?
Well, I mean, I have to count myself now in it because I didn't know it. So, is there value?
You're talking about value. We're talking about value propositions, and if there's value, like also for somebody that is 75, for example, why should they even enter Roblox? Is that the question?
Well, I mean, we are still talking about health applications. So if you can even link it to health-related questions, that would be even better, because we could all agree that this is something for younger patients, and we just build a healthcare system now for the next generation. Or do we also have to integrate the elder population?
We have to integrate the elder, because if we look at how old our population is, especially in Germany, we have to take care of the elder generation especially. But now look at all the people that might be alone at home and that really need some enhancement in their life. This is why this whole thing with robotics and everything is being explored so much. How can we enhance a world of somebody who might have to lay in bed the whole day? I think that virtual reality, especially in this case, can do a lot of keeping just the mind and the brain to do something, to keep it trained, and not to... I mean, this is especially for elder people. I see a lot of improvements when you take them into virtual reality where they can just live a life, even if they're not capable of doing it with their body. This is the biggest chance that we have. And as my mom said, maybe you need mushrooms to really experience it in the way it should be, because this has a lot to do with also how your neurons work and how you can perceive this. But if you can add this layer, how much better would so many people feel that do not even have social interactions anymore? For me, it is especially this field where we have to look into. With COVID, people could not even visit their grandma anymore. People were dying alone. What if they had had the experience of being in a virtual world, at least, together with their grandchildren, their children, whatever, and to have these interactions, if it's not in person, in a virtual world?
Yeah, but so I'm more the guy asking the questions, but here I'm skeptical. I don't use video conferences with my family, for example, right? Now it's very accessible.
I did.
And many people, I think, don't do that. So I also don't think I will ever meet them in the metaverse.
Yeah, but now I tell you my story, for example, because my grandmother, especially during COVID, she lived in Venezuela. So for me, it was the greatest advantage to at least see her in a virtual environment. And as we already stated, we are not already there where we want to be. Do you have Apple Plus? Look at what they are expecting to look the virtual world like. It will feel a lot more natural, and this is also what Wolfgang said. If you become more of a natural feeling, it will enhance your world, and it is still working. When I was talking about Rafik Anadol and his father having Alzheimer's disease and how he's working with pictures and sound to enhance what the brain is perceiving, there are a lot of options, even if you do not take drugs in this case, that will do something with your brain to make you feel better. And this is what we are still working on. I don't say that we are there, and this is why I think we are here to talk about what is possible also in the medical space. Anybody wants to?
I mean, this is not a more personal point, but I'm also skeptical. I mean, with my parents, I don't... we just take a normal phone, yeah, and every try to do a video conference with WhatsApp ends up in just upside down things and so on. Although my father is really, really much doing in this area, but obviously with our son, we do a lot of WhatsApp video. He's living in London. I think we can make the offer, but we shouldn't think that everybody accepts it, takes it up. But we can make offers.
Yeah, but it's not about WhatsApp, it's about creating a virtual experience that lives up
but
to the fact that we do have another experience.
Yeah, but even WhatsApp is somehow easy to use, and any virtual experience is even more complicated to use. That's the point. I think we have to make it extremely easy to use, and that's the big challenge.
Yeah,
the people who win.
Another application hardware thing like this was for Web 2. We still need this for Metaverse or Web 3.
Yes, that's right, but that is more than 10 years ago. So for more than 10 years ago, we are waiting for Google. No, not for Google. We are all waiting for Apple to produce the glasses. And every year, there is now a new patent out, and Apple will bring it this year. This year, we see the glasses from Apple. And then we have the breakthrough. And since 10 years, nothing is coming, and nobody really knows. Maybe if Apple does it, and I think if Apple really does it, it will not be a fully immersive stuff. It will be a very simple glasses concentrating on the most essential thing, maybe just giving directions or having a microphone for Siri or something like that. It will be very simple in the beginning.
Tori, did you find a killer app for health in DMEIA?
Oh, sorry.
I think the one that is most used already is the one for pain medication, especially in intensive care units. They could reduce the use of painkillers already. And the other one is for physiotherapy after, for just trying to push all the fingers or something to get into motion again. And that's already used. And there's some research by Brennan Spiegel. I think he's a bit of a starter of all those. And the other really interesting thing was patients with schizophrenia that could make an avatar of the voices they're hearing and speak with their avatar, but the therapist would go into the avatar of their voices and speak with them. I think that was very interesting for medical use cases. And especially in teaching, I think it plays a role. For example, at University Aachen, there are multiple use cases in teaching for medical students.
Okay. So do we have more questions from the audience? Yeah, Ben.
Thanks. This is a great panel, by the way. It's very interesting, and I'm learning a lot or trying to understand. One thing, so I come from the United States. I was talking to Peter in the break about this. I've seen, at least in the US, lots of great ideas. And at the end of the day, one of the challenges is that the electronic health record systems, the EMRs, they really have the power and they're not incentivized to make any of this easy. So just a very basic question is, what has your experience been either trying to work with these companies or collect data? Are they bypassable, or is it, I don't want to say intractable, but a very difficult problem from your perspective?
Hi.
Hi.
So that's basically what we are doing. Actually, that's the reason why we started the company. Because until a few years ago, every AI startup needed to solve this problem from scratch, separately. So whenever you need to develop any healthcare AI model and you want to train it, first you need to solve the problem of integration with several EMRs, EHRs, structure the data. You spend a couple of years just on this, and only then you can start training your model. And that's why we and some other competitors started to work on this about, I would say, 3 years ago. That's when all of the markets started to move. For understanding, it is bypassable. It's possible to solve this, but if all your business is around this, it's much easier to invest the needed efforts and the resources. And then the others, those AI startups, research, etc., can use this as a service, as a product. So we did it. Today we are able to integrate with most of the US EHRs and make this data accessible. However, it's several years of work. So when you want to do it just for your research, it's probably not cost effective.
And I think in Germany they make it extra complicated because this is a lot about control and power as well. You see the same in DeFi with the banking system. I mean, who has the power later? If you give it back to the people, if they own everything, you kind of lose some control. So I think there will be still conflicts going on this. And then they will say, yeah, but you need the third party to really verify it, that it's the true data, and so on. It comes all back to these questions. And it's interesting to see it like a more philosophical perspective as well of who owns what and how this will be continued when we have Internet of Things and when we have more AI who is taking over in so many parts. We saw DALL-E, for example, that was text to image. Now we have text to video, and it's just amazing. And this is just a few weeks, I feel, because text to video I hadn't seen before, and it's just crazy what they are doing. So with all the data also that Google has collected, and not only Apple, Google I think is one of the leading companies in the world who has so much data about healthcare and who is really doing something with that data. Will they give it to somebody else? I don't think so. So as I said, for me, Google in the whole Web3 part is totally underrated, and I think you have a question or add something on this, yeah.
Thanks. Well, I have a rather provocative question in this regard. So especially when it's about sensitive medical data, isn't it something that we really want to give to companies? I mean, the Germans are really reluctant in providing data, and I think that has maybe a historical reason. But maybe this is a purely German view. I think we are paying tax so that the state can take care of particular services. If the state would provide them, we would not need a company to take care of our medical record data. If there would be a state-funded agency that is trustworthy by definition because it's run by the state, you wouldn't no need to have a blockchain-based company that tries to run smart contracts, but you would provide these type of data to researchers that are paid by the state to do research on the data, to explore medical data, and to provide information and explanation on how to deal with that in later on, without a company that is trying to make a profit out of your data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this only works as long as you trust the government and the state. And this is always like the problem of the whole thing. If it goes wrong, like some countries were trustworthy at one point and then they were not, and things that it might be developing in the wrong direction, why give it to a company when you have it stored like in a decentralized way? This is the question. It's not about having a company owning it in this case here, but about yourself owning your own data and yourself being able to sell or rent it to whoever you want to. If you say, yeah, it's okay that Google has all my data and I agree and I have an opt-out to whatever, yeah, then it's fair. But why would it be more fair to have it with a government than with a company? That's a way of trust. Who do you trust?
Yeah, I would guess that in most cases, individuals lack the capacity to really think through what can happen with their data. So 23andMe, for instance, and Ancestry were heavily used because it was really fun. Nobody ever thought what could have been done with that. And after the Golden Gate Killer was caught, and after FBI found out how valuable this information actually is to trace down criminals, people started to think, maybe it wasn't such a good idea that I provided such valuable information. Others may think differently, but I mean, nobody thought this through when they were sharing their data.
So you suggest providing it to the FDA straight away?
No, but maybe a comment on this. Just as said before, as soon as you give data away, you lost the sovereignty about it. So there's no question about that. So you should be, as a data owner, always sovereign about your data, or self-deterministic on your data. And that means if we really want to use data, then it needs to be respected from the law perspective, regulations, etc. But still, the sovereignty needs to be with you. And it's about digital sovereignty as well. So if you really think about digital sovereignty, it's about the technical measures which we can do, but still, data sovereignty is on top of that and lives on top of that. And it's not only a German problem. Last year I had a discussion at Texas Children's, and it was exactly the same thing. They were fearing that they lose control of their data, and that's why they don't share it immediately. Easy. I mean, that's just normal. The thing, though, is if we introduce open standards like FHIR, like OMOP, like Odyssey, and work on these, on how to transform it, how to make data available with respecting for second use, then we can do it.
But our question is not whether it's with a company or the government yeah.
I just, if I may, I just have to add to that, because I just met the guy, for example, who invented the FAIR principles, and he's against open data. Yeah, because he says this is the worst thing that we can do. It's about accessibility, and the ownership should stay with the owner. Yeah, that's what he says. We all in the whole community misunderstand FAIR. It's not about open data. Because he says open data can be completely wrongly used. There's so much danger about wrong usage. You can protect right usage of data much better if you have the owner in the game. And open data, actually, you leave the data, you leave the rights to it, as Hartmut said. Once you give them away, it's gone. Yeah, and then the misuse starts immediately. And the half-life of this data is so short then, because the first misuse, because you don't have the right metadata, is basically, making this data distrustable, which they were not in the first place. So it's an interesting thing. We should really just make sure that in the scientific community, we need actually systems that make sure that if somebody has data, he really is taking care of them. And this is not an open data space, because there the care of this is taken away. So just think about this. And so it should be actually worldwide. And there's other countries that are not because what you said, Germany, it's a German problem, it's because of value and worth. Yeah. And you're making data much quicker distrustable if you just leave them where, out in, and it's with everything. You just put things on the street, you disvalue it. That's it.
But one thing I wanted to add, sorry. It's easier, of course. And I think that most people will share your point of view. Let someone else take care of it, because oh my God, this is too much of an effort. This is why we're talking about custodial and non-custodial wallets. If you have a custodial wallet, somebody else is taking care. You don't need to secure your seed phrase, whatever. It's so much easier and so much more accessible. And this is why we basically do it. Not because we believe it might be the right thing. If you take responsibility for your own life, this might be best. But of course, I totally understand that not everybody is willing to do that. And then it comes to, yeah, let the government take care of that. That would be better than companies, maybe. But just what Joachim said, in this moment, we open it to, yeah, who is really taking care of it? And this is the question that you have to answer for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, also to add some other thoughts. I mean, also this question, shouldn't we give it to the state company or state organization because they are trustful per se? And I think this is really, I mean, all the use cases that are discussed around blockchain really depend also on the country where you discuss that. And I think in the coalition contract, they say they would like to test to have the German land registry on a blockchain. And I thought, this is crazy. I mean, we Germans, we trust our land registry, and that works fine. And our land and our house, that's our holy grail, yeah? And we don't want to put this on any digital service because it works so fine in Germany. So I think it's the completely wrong use case because we have an excellent system for that. In other countries, it's complete opposite. They don't have that. And for them, because the state is corrupt, there a digital land registry would be ideal. And I think this is also very often really comes from the culture where you do that. And in this sense, I mean, all the comments, I like them very much, that you say, well, you own the data, but you only present to other people some proof that you know something about the data, yeah, which has a lot to do with zero-knowledge proof, and therefore zero-knowledge proof becomes very prominent at the moment. Yeah, you don't want to give your data away, you just want to show someone else that you know something, and you indicate that by giving him some information by which he can prove that you know it, but you don't tell him what you know. Yeah, so that's about all this zero-knowledge proof, and that's also what's behind all this triangle that I've shown, where you are so critical. Yeah, the point there is you are not giving away the certificate. What you give away is the information that something is true. So you give away the information that you own a driver license, nothing more. Yeah? So when I ask you digitally, do you have a driver license? You wouldn't give me your driver license digitally. Yeah? I send you something like a proof request, and your wallet is then sending a proof presentation, and that just indicates, yes, he has a driver license, not more. just this thing, and I can't replay that.
Yeah,
and that's the interesting thing about this technology.
Yeah, exactly. And for this kind of scenario, I really like this idea. But for this kind of scenario, especially in Germany, we don't need a blockchain. I mean, this is regulated by Bundesverkehrsministerium. They issue out the driver license. They have it in their database.
No, it's first thing, the whole thing, the whole triangle, the only thing on the blockchain are just digital signatures. Yeah. The driver license, all the rest is not on the blockchain. The blockchain just stores the digital signatures, nothing more. The driver license and all the certificates are in your wallet. They are not on the blockchain. That's so interesting. So a lot is off-chain, and on-chain is just the anchor. Yeah? And here it's not just that we try to replicate the Bundeskraftfahramt or so, it's just this interaction where you are going to show your identity to third parties. Yeah, to the hotel. How often does it take place that you go to a hotel and say, can I have your passport? And then they just copy it. I mean, how many car rental companies have a copy of my driver license and my passport in very strange countries? Yeah, probably they wouldn't somehow, probably they wouldn't accept a digital solution. They would still want to have the paper document. But this is the interaction where this proof comes into the game. I wouldn't like to replace the Kraftfahrbundesamt or so.
So I think the difference between driver license and healthcare data for research is that with driver license, you only want this proof. With healthcare data, you want the patient level data if you conduct the research. So you want, either it's a pharma company or a research institute, they sometimes need patient level data for the research. So, and then the blockchain, you only can use it to control who gets the data, but, and you can give the control back to the patient. You can manage consent management on blockchain, but if there is an approval, the data will be transmitted.
Okay, so I really don't want to end this discussion now here. I'd rather quickly summarize it, and then we can transition to the Dorint Hotel if you are still interested in continuing the discussion. So basically, we all agree that we don't have to decide between a company or a government. This is not the question. It's a new commodity, basically, that we are talking about, blockchain technology, and companies as well as governments can work with it. And let's see in a few years who came up with the best solution, which then will be probably in use. Okay, this is the end of the program tonight.